Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and unauthorized.tv. I was talking to a friend of Space Bunnies today. I was doing my high-intensity course, which was kind of a bear, to be honest with you. Anyhow, afterwards we were talking a bit, and she said she'd been studying some theology, and she was wondering how you can tell when something is evil. You know, she said there's a lot of Bible verses about this and that. How do you recognize evil when you see it? And what I've concluded is that the most reliable way to detect evil is based on the Bible verse where it says, "Woe to those who call good evil and evil good." Because what is being described there is what Owen would call wizardry and what I call inversion. Inversion is literally insisting that things are the opposite of what they truly are. It's beyond simple lying. It's beyond simple falsehood. It's about an attempt to impose a false narrative and a false reality on others. And I think that's why the act of inversion is called out directly in that way, because we see so much of it, and we see so much of it being imposed, and this is where we see the lie stacked upon the lie stacked upon the lie. Today I was posting on the recent Florida anti-BDS law. And it's insanely obnoxious. It's insanely and objectively anti-American. It would be hard to be more anti-American than this particular law. A similar law has already been found in Texas to be unconstitutional. It's obviously unconstitutional. And yet the Florida governor and the Florida cabinet members actually flew to Jerusalem, something that is actually illegal under Florida law, and signed this new Florida law, this new imposition upon U.S. citizens in the state of Florida that forbids them from exercising their First Amendment rights. I mean, and when you look at the number of lies that are required just in the text of the law, even within the text of the law, the examples that they give are contradictory. Now, I'm not focused on this particular Florida law or even the series of laws. I'm just pointing out that we can recognize this as evil because it's more than just a simple falsehood. It's a series of falsehoods stacked one upon the other, and then the entire false edifice is declared to be good. This is practically textbook inversion. And so, that's how we can recognize that the particular law, as well as a number of the various statements involved, are evil, because it is an inversion of reality, an inversion of the truth, and an inversion of unalienable rights granted to Americans by their creator and guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. The rights do not come from the Constitution. The rights are simply acknowledged and guaranteed to be protected by the Constitution. And so when you see this behavior, these redefinitions, these discovered emanations and penumbras that do not exist, when you see symbols being modified, the rainbow. Owen's talked about this too. The rainbow is God's promise not to destroy the world by water. It has nothing to do with anybody's pride. It has nothing to do with who is attracted to whom. And in the same way, when you see these symbols being adopted and stolen and folded and spindled and mutilated, that's the process of inversion. That is an evil process. When Hitler took the swastika, the swastika was not a German symbol. It was a Hindu symbol. Now, you may have different opinions about Hinduism, obviously, but I think that we can agree that the context in which it placed was another indication of inversion. And we see history being inverted all the time. When Ben Shapiro writes that America is the result of Judeo-Christian culture, that's inversion. That's historical falsehood. That's evil. It's an attempt to deny a people their history. Same thing as with the whole year zero obsession with the left. Whether you deal with the French revolutionaries, the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, the left is always about trying to revise history, eliminate history, and start from scratch with their beliefs as the axioms upon which society is founded. Never works, of course, because those axioms provide for a foundation that is arguably worse than sand. But we're seeing this more and more today. Now suddenly they can't recognize the difference between men and women, boys and girls. They're claiming that different groups of people are equal, even though they not only are observably different in their capabilities, but they are fundamentally different right down to their DNA. It's always interesting when they say things, when you see those old terms like, color is only skin deep. That's true, but DNA goes right down to the very marrow of your bones. And so it's not the color that matters, it's the DNA. And so, does that mean that everything is completely determinative and we are simply robots who wander around thinking that we have free will? No, of course not. If you follow the logic of all the scientists and pseudo-philosophers who try to make that claim, their logic is invariably flawed. Invariably flawed. And, this shouldn't be a surprise. It's for the obvious reason that scientists are terrible philosophers. As a general rule, they have no training in logic. They have no reading in philosophy, either the classics or the medievals. And they tend to know nothing about any religion at all. And so, it's always been interesting, back in the 2008 to 2010 timeframe, when I was, it was after I'd written The Irrational Atheist. I engaged in a number of debates with different atheists and that sort of thing. And I think it was a little bit shocking to some of them when I would first prove to them and everyone else, and then specifically point out that their knowledge of Christianity didn't even rise to the level of the Chronicles of Narnia. Now, how do you expect an intelligent opinion about a subject when that individual's level of knowledge, forget Wikipedia, it doesn't even rise to the level of a children's book? And so this is also something that is a indicator, is that when you see ignorance of the subject that is being addressed, when you see people relying upon the mainstream media's version of a historical event, a scientific quote-unquote fact, anything really, you have a pretty good idea that they simply don't know what they're talking about. So they're not really engaging in genuine dialectic. They're simply resorting to rhetoric in an attempt to emotionally persuade you and to manipulate you into the position that they want you to accept, the perspective that they want you to accept. And we're so surrounded by this. That's what I mean when I say that we're living in the upside down. If you've seen Stranger Things, you know what I'm talking about. The world that we live in is the upside down. It's just that many of us don't realize it. And, that's why so many of you, I think, are so hungry for the truth, are so desperate for the truth, because you know on some level that you don't belong here. You know on some level that there is truth and reality and beauty and hope. And yet when you look around, what do you see? You see lies. You don't just see ugliness, you see grotesqueries. You're constantly told to despair, to fear, to submit, to cringe. But that's not who you are. And that's not the world that you were created for. This is what it means that the world is fallen. C.S. Lewis, in his other famous trilogy, the Space Trilogy, which, other trilogy, obviously the Chronicles of Narnia, not a trilogy, I misspoke. They're not as likable. They're not as enjoyable as the Chronicles of Narnia. The Chronicles of Narnia, of course, are wonderfully entertaining and educational, and not just about theology. I think the end of A Horse and His Boy is one of the best, most satisfying, best written endings of a book that I've ever read. And it even deals in a way with the sociosexual hierarchy and the responsibility of the alpha and the freedom of the bravo, which is kind of fascinating when you think about it. But when you look at the Space Trilogy, and you really get an amazing picture of the world that we experience when you understand the significance of C.S. Lewis's phrase, the silent planet. It's the one planet that doesn't take part in the celestial harmonies. It's the one planet that doesn't take part in the joyful music praising the Creator. It's silent because it's bent. It's silent because it's broken. It's silent because it's fallen and it is inverted. And I think the more that you understand that, the easier it is to understand what your purpose is and what your day-to-day objectives should be. I mean, we're bent too. We're fallen too. And so, every day we fail. Every day we sin. Every day we're overcome by the inversion in some minor way. But the beauty of being human is that we have the ability to pick ourselves up and get right back in the conflict. Every day is a war. It's not just the cultural war, but it's also the spiritual war, and it's also the war within yourself to see through the upside down, to pierce through the false narratives, and to focus on the beautiful, the good, and the true. And it can come in many different ways. Logos, as Owen likes to call it, can be seen in many different situations, many different people. You can see it in large things, you can see it in small things. But once you learn to see it, once you learn to look for it, and once you learn to appreciate it, it becomes difficult to stop. And that's why the enemy works so hard to try to get you to hear no good, see no good, and speak no good. Because that's their inversion. They want to prevent you from seeing the truth. They want to prevent you from hearing it, and they especially want to prevent you from speaking it. And so that's why it is so important to refuse to submit, to refuse to give in, to refuse to allow yourself to become the mindless slave, the NPC that they want you to become. Everything that you've experienced from the moment that you were sent to kindergarten has been designed to metaphorically lobotomize you. It's literally designed to teach you to be incapable of recognizing beauty. There's a quote that I actually put at the beginning of one of my books. Not the beginning, but at the beginning of a chapter of one of my books. It's a book called The World in Shadow. And I thought it was really significant because it really revealed a lot of the core sickness involved in the way that education is done. Listen to this. And just so you understand, this is a book that was written by one of the men who is the most influential in American public education. The great purpose of school can be realized better in dark, airless, ugly places. It is to master the physical self, to transcend the beauty of nature. School should develop the power to withdraw from the external world. That was written by William Torrey Harris in his book, The Philosophy of Education. So you can see that the seeds of inversion were planted in you when you were in elementary school. some of the unquestioned assumptions that you have, some of the ideas that you've never questioned have been literally planted in your mind during your formative years. And so you don't even realize how you've been modified, how you've been molded, and how you've been bent out of shape. And it's a struggle to penetrate through that. I mean, it was kind of funny. Apparently, some of our critics were claiming that I've never read a single one of these books. That's mildly amusing because I've literally written at least 15 of them. And I've also edited dozens more. So I assure you, I've read most of them. I haven't read all of the Encyclopedia Britannica from 1911. I'm not a big encyclopedia reader. It's more of a reference work. But I can assure you that I've read the entirety of those magenta History of the Peninsular War by Oman. I've read the entirety of the campaigns of Alexander, the Thucydides, the Herodotus. You can see the landmark editions up on the one shelf. I've also read all of the Francis Fukuyama that you can see there. And it's a little bit ironic that people would accuse me of not reading books that I obviously have, because books are one of the best ways of punching through the lies. If we disregard the theory of the Mandela effect, which frankly, it still kind of bothers me a bit, especially when I'm, reading an old P.G. Wodehouse book from the early 20th century, and he makes references to the lamb and the lion. You're like, okay, that's not wolf and the sheep. So, but anyhow, if we disregard that, the point is that at least you know that what is there, even if it was not entirely true, even if some of the assumptions made, some of the statements made were incorrect, at least you know what was established at that point in time, what that person thought at that point in time, right or wrong. And it gives you something to counteract those seeds that were planted in your head in those dark and ugly, airless places. So, so we have to understand that we live in the upside down. But it's equally important to understand that we have the ability to see through it, and we also have the ability to successfully deal with the monsters that inhabit it. That's why we're told repeatedly that we're not given a spirit of fear, and that we are not just conquerors, we are more than conquerors. And so keep that in mind whenever you find yourself, getting overly excited, overly worried, negatively affected by events like the big YouTube purgings or whatever. They don't matter. We can and will overcome those things. We can and will overcome worse things. The important thing is to just keep pushing forward and refuse to accept this false reality, this mass of inversion that has been erected in order to delude and confuse you. On a tangential note, I just want to thank the literally hundreds of people who have been subscribing to Unauthorized over the last 3 days. It's really encouraging to me and to all the other creators there. We've got some really big things in the works specifically for Unauthorized. I've actually spent the afternoon working on the first original documentary that we're going to be producing, and it's going to premiere on Unauthorized, and I think it's going to be of a fair amount of interest to a fair number of you, and it's going to be completely free, of course, to all the subscribers. It's going to be part of our premium content, and if it goes well, and there's actually reason to believe that other places are going to want to pick it up and broadcast it, then we're just going to keep doing more. We're very seriously committed to not just having a place where you can see some of the content from some of your favorite commentators like Owen or David the Good or Chuck Dixon, but we're going to start with producing the documentaries, and we're just going to build from there, one step at a time. But the fact that you guys are supporting us so strongly is really creating some excellent opportunities for us to build a stronger foundation. And we're working on that too. I can assure you that we're very, very aware of all the various points of vulnerability, and we're taking measures at every single point. So if you haven't subscribed to Unauthorized yet, I'd encourage you to do so. Owen has already begun taking his streams down from YouTube. There are others who I understand are planning to follow suit soon. And we have no idea. Nobody on YouTube now has any idea how long they're going to be there. No one can possibly know. And what we're seeing here, not just with YouTube, but with Twitter and with the payment processors and everything, what we're seeing here is the breakdown of Western capitalism. They're literally destroying the very basis for the economy, because as a number of economists have famously published papers on, the expectations of future rewards, the expectations of stability and predictability is vitally important for economic activity to take place. And when you can't know what tomorrow is going to bring, you can't plan and you can't build. And so it's very unfortunate, but what we're seeing here with big tech is the first big step towards the regression in technology and what I call the retreat to barbarism, because it's not going to be possible for people to create, for people to build, for people to do the kinds of things that lead to technological advancement. But we're getting pretty far astray here. I'm kind of wandering, so we'll leave it at that. But thanks for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you the next time. This is the Darkstream. I'm Box Day.